This episode of the Rebel Education podcast is sponsored by Active Floor. That's activefloor.com. Hello, I'm Tom Rogers, and this is the Rebel Education podcast. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Rebel Education podcast with me, Tom Rogers. I'm absolutely delighted in this episode that I'm going to share with you an interview that I conducted with Georgina Young last October through my school leader interview series. Last October, I went to interview Georgina at her school, which is Houghton Primary School, and we talked leadership, we talked life, we talked how schools operate, her career. We pretty much touched on everything you could possibly think of in a good 40-minute interview. And it was just amazing to be able to talk it through with Georgina. I know at the moment she's one of many head teachers facing probably the challenge of their career in many respects, to kind of overcome that fear of going into a place of work, knowing that you could catch a virus at any point and still going in there, keeping the school open, inviting the kids in and making sure the families are touching base. I was in a bit of a rage yesterday. I wrote a blog yesterday because I'd read a column in the Scottish Herald where a former head teacher had been very dismissive of the efforts of teachers and very condescending about what they're doing. And I think Georgina, along with many others, really symbolises the amazing effort that teachers have been putting in to keep going through this crisis. So I thought it was a brilliant time to share the interview again with you on the podcast. And intermittently, over the next few weeks, I'm going to be sharing the other interviews with the other head teachers that I interviewed as well, interspersed with some other podcasts. So you can kind of enjoy them as we go along. Georgina is a very special friend to me as well on a personal level. She spoke to me over Twitter many times early last year when I was going through some stuff, and she's been an amazing support to me, an amazing professional voice, somebody who I value massively. But the thing I love about Georgina as well is it's not all song and dance with her. She gets her head down, she gets on with it, and she's got some amazing wisdom and knowledge through a long career to share with people. So I hope you enjoy the interview as much as I enjoyed the interview when I was actually conducting it. So let's listen now. Georgina, thanks for joining a classic live stream interview. We love live stream interviews.
My first ever live stream, so bear with me.
There you go. So the first question I'm going to ask, these are kind of, they could be short answers, they don't have to be, but the question one, what's the first thing that you grab in the morning?
So the first thing I grab is a coffee in the morning, and I'm a real heathen. It's not even proper coffee, it's just instant, but that I need a coffee before I do anything. That's it.
It's Diet Coke for me.
Yeah.
I don't drink tea or coffee.
I can tell. 3 Diet Cokes already today.
Terrible. Absolutely awful. Who is the biggest inspiration in your life?
Okay, so I had to think about this, and I'm not inspired massively by the stars, I suppose, or people who are famous or whatever. The biggest inspiration in my life was my paternal grandmother, who was a wife, a housewife, didn't have a particular job. She wasn't in teaching. There's nobody in my family that were teachers. But she grew up in the East End of London, sort of at the turn of the century, and had 7 children, one of whom died when they were pretty young. She brought up 4 boys, 3 girls, and in a really tough time. Her husband died when he was young, and they lived in poverty, one up, one down house. I met her, but I was only 1 when she died, so I've got no memory of her and what she was like as a character. But I've heard all the stories about her, and she was a cantankerous old witch, probably. according to my mum, who was her daughter-in-law. However, when I look back on her life, she was the most amazing woman who lived during war. You know, her husband had died. She had to send 2 of her children off to be evacuated during the war. And as a mum, you know, that really resonated with me. One of those kids was my dad. She's just, inspiring because I think she was really strong. Not famous, she's not written a book, you know, she's not been on telly, nothing like that. But she was just a really strong woman doing what women did. And I like to think that I've got a little bit of her in me.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I know that you've been a head teacher for 13 years,
Yeah.
and prior to that a deputy in different schools and so
Yeah.
on. So what do you think it is that people notice about you?
I don't know, Tom. What did you notice about me when we first met today? Because I've no idea. I don't even think about that. I don't like to think about it. Today I'm thinking I've got a sty because I'm a bit run down. Maybe that's what people notice. I literally don't know. I'm quite introverted. I don't like to be in the limelight. Doing this is out of my comfort zone. So I don't know. What do people notice?
That's interesting you say that, because I know there's a lot of conversation about introverts and extroverts in education, and you're a head teacher, and by your own kind of admission there, you feel you're an introvert.
Absolutely,
so
yeah.
how, that's interesting. I mean, how does that play out as a head teacher, being an introvert?
I think I'm in my comfort zone here, and particularly, you know, this school, I've been here 20 years and 13 years as a head. We don't sit still, it's not to do with that, but I take time to get to know people. I'm a slow burner. If you want someone to come in and do a quick job, you know, like people sometimes have to, I'm not the person for that. But yeah, I am introverted. Through my first part of my career, standing up in front of an audience was, you know, I was really nervous doing that. Now, you know, it's just experience.
Now you're doing a live stream with Tom Rogers.
I know,
so.
really worrying. But, yeah.
Well, I suppose this leads on to my next question, which you probably won't be able to answer either, but what do you hope people notice about you?
What I hope for is that they're going to, after a little time of meeting me, is to realise that actually I'm interested, I listen, people fascinate me, stories fascinate me, so I love a good story, I love hearing about people's lives and about what makes them tick, and listening to that, things resonate with me. I'm quite emotional, so I feel it for them. So that's what I hope. It's like a warmth, really, I suppose, that comes across. Hopefully they see that I'm a good head and all of that, but it's really that depth.
Which actually leads on to my next question perfectly, which is, bearing in mind that's what you hope people notice from you. What would you say? Because, I mean, what frustrates me sometimes, particularly on social media, is that we don't necessarily hear a lot about the failures and the challenges and so on. So if I was to ask you, what do you think your biggest weakness or your fatal flaw is as a head teacher, as a professional, as a person?
I think, going back, I think a huge lack of confidence was a big flaw. Feeling that I was the only person that was getting it wrong, making wrong decisions, on hindsight, worried me. I used to lose a lot of sleep in the early days. Yeah. I hate upsetting people, and I'm strong. If I feel I'm in the right, that's one thing. But I don't like getting things wrong for people. It's that impact. So that was my big flaw. But over time, you just grow broad shoulders, really, because there's things you have to do, there's decisions you have to make as a head teacher that you've just got to stick by, and you gain confidence through that.
Yeah.
And the school's running well, and we've had some successes, and that success breeds success. But yeah, the flaw, I suppose, is there's still times where I think, oh God, what am I doing? 13 years in.
Yeah.
I tend to sell myself short, I suppose, most of the time. But I mean, that's not a bad thing.
No, not necessarily. I mean, what's your biggest strength then? I mean, if that's your weakness, what's your biggest strength?
I think resilience, actually. Thinking about this, I think I'm pretty resilient. Teaching and headship leadership is a tough gig. But I've been in teaching 32 years. I only had a very short time out when I had my son. So that day-to-day of the job, you've got to be pretty resilient. You never know what's going to hit you on any day.
I think teachers, once they get to the kind of 30-year mark, they should get the letter from the Queen. You know, like when people are 100,
Yeah.
they get a letter from the Queen. I think teachers should get that when they get to like 30 years into
Definitely
into
something would be nice, yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think resilience is a very underrated kind of quality in teachers. You know, we kind of hear a lot about pedagogy, knowledge, whatever, but it's rare we actually talk about that determination and resilience to live through experiences, to carry on scraping the ice off the car at 6 a.m. when you know it's going to be a horrible day. I know every profession has that, but when you've got to put that face on in front of children
every day,
6 hours a day, that to me is a significant difference with a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
So, thinking back to your school days, awesome or terrible?
Terrible.
Enough said. And
Terrible.
what's your kind of, why were they terrible? I mean, you don't have to delve into that.
Yeah, I'm not going to pour myself
No.
out, but yeah, it was pretty terrible. I think mainly, you know, there's particular memories I have. You know, I grew up in a very working class family with not much money. You know, there were opportunities that I was never given. I was, you know, but going back then, there wasn't, you know, you didn't have your pupil premium kids, but I would have been one of those children.
Yeah.
And certainly there were things that I wasn't allowed to do, and I remember overhearing conversations by teachers that, you know, that I wasn't allowed to go for certain opportunities because my family wouldn't have been able to support it. So, for example, like learning to play the cello. I mean, I don't, you know, whether I ever would have been successful at it, I don't know, but I was not given the opportunity. And I remember overhearing a conversation when I was about 7, 8 about that. Secondary school was just, primary was all right. It was in the 70s. It was all very laid back, you know. But secondary, I absolutely hated.
Yeah.
Absolutely hated. Public humiliation. I've said on Twitter before, you know, being stood up by a maths teacher and publicly humiliated for not understanding something. But then I think I look back on that time, and whilst it was pretty horrible, it's made me the teacher that I am, you know. You draw on that, but in the most positive way. There's no point moaning about stuff, just get on and, you know, make it better. It's really my mantra.
Makes sense. And I mean, what is your number one biggest pet peeve, you know, in life? What's your, or as a school leader even, whatever you want?
I suppose it's people who pretend that they know what they're doing when they're not, when they don't. Or will try to cover up mistakes. That's what I can't bear. Just be honest. I am, you know, if I make a mistake, I'll always own up to that, and I'll say that I'm sorry if I've done something wrong. I can't bear it when people are sort of trying to sweep stuff under the carpet. I can't bear it when people don't listen, you know.
Yeah.
It's rudeness, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's it, really. I mean, you know, I've been watching the 101 series, and whilst there's a lot, I agree with that. I think it's fantastic. I sometimes struggle to think, what would I put in there, because there's lots of stuff I don't like, but nothing really riles me that much. Just push it aside and get on with something else.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I mean, more what you're saying, I suppose, is what you would admire in a leader, for example, would be, I suppose, that sense of humility, authenticity, being able to say, you know, actually, deputy or whoever it is, that was my mistake. I messed up.
Absolutely.
I should have done that. I should have done this.
Yeah.
And being able to do that and say it and acknowledge it rather than cover it up.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But at the same time, if I'm right, I'm right.
There you go. Don't lose the eye.
No,
That's
exactly.
what Alex. I mean, I'm going to go a bit closer actually because we're miles away.
Yeah.
But one of the things I liked about actually Alex Ferguson's autobiography was he said he did say in there that I never lost an argument in the dressing room.
Yeah.
So the idea that he said, you know, I think it was Beckham or somebody challenged his tactics or whatever at half time, and he was like, I will not. If I'm in the right, I'm not going to lose that argument. It was a very interesting passage I remember reading in his autobiography, which I quite liked. Random one, but comfortable silences or non-stop conversation?
Depends on, I suppose, how long I've known somebody.
Yeah.
So initially, non-stop conversation. After that, after a day, I'm fine sitting next to somebody that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
What I enjoy more than anything is a really good laugh. You know, when you know somebody that well that you can just laugh at things.
Yeah.
That's the best.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I enjoy a good chat.
Yeah.
But I'm happy with computer
Yeah.
sciences.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what's better, being fair or being nice?
Being fair, without a doubt. You know, we all like to be liked, but there's decisions that you have to make that are down to fairness. And sometimes you can't tell everybody the background to that. That's really difficult.
Yeah.
But being fair, that's got to be your guiding principle. You know.
Yeah.
You know, I've had to make decisions. I've had to go along a certain path, which not necessarily some people have understood. I could have been nice about it, but it would have made the difference. Whereas actually being fair, and actually that's what people respect you for. I think they trust you.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely being fair.
Makes sense. That
Yeah.
makes sense. And okay, we're moving on to kind of more. I mean, that's just giving hopefully people a general picture of your style and the way you do things. But now we're going to move on to more like teaching leadership. So, first question is, what's the most embarrassing thing that happened to you in class as a teacher? These are amazing questions for me.
Yeah, death.
Just
Okay. Okay, so I was teaching here, I was deputy head here, and we'd only had smart boards for a very short time, so the technology was new.
Yeah.
I'm that old, but the technology was new. Put the smart board up, and I was teaching children at that point how to cut and paste. This is how long ago it is,
Yeah.
you know, that you actually taught children that.
yeah,
So, and we were copying pictures from the internet in order to do some work on our favourite author, and I decided to use Michael Rosen as my example.
yeah,
So I'd looked at it the night before. We googled Michael Rosen images. Images came up, you know, from his books and so on, which I loved. And little did I know that the day before that we did that, he'd released a book on something to do with sex and relationships for adults. So Michael, if you're listening to this, this is what happened. Googled it, put an image search in. The images that came up were very interesting, but they weren't what.
no.
And then because I was new to the technology, trying to close the smart board down really quickly I had to put something out to parents that day to apologise.
I'll be honest. Yeah, I've had something similar when this was in my first school. I think it was the first or second year. It was a year 10 or 11 class. And I had to Google a map of, I can't even remember what it was a map of Europe, I think. And I Googled this map of Europe, and I was explaining, you know, I was not looking at the map.
Yeah.
I was just explaining, this was the direction that these people went in, this is what... Anyway, the faces, I picked up after about a minute that the faces were like either at me or something else,
Yeah.
but it was all a bit strange, and I went, what? And obviously I turned around and there was some rather disturbing images behind the image.
Yeah.
Like a border
Yes.
of kind of, I think probably originating somewhere in Russia, but the web feed, so it was interesting.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the hardest part about being a teacher or a head teacher?
I mean, there's, you know, being a head, there are many challenges. There are huge challenges. I think actually one of the hardest part for me is the public face that you have to present all the time. So I live quite close to where I work, and you know, you are on duty all the time. You know, I can't be seen, I don't feel, you know, professional. You know, but it's professional duty and responsibility that I am the head teacher of a local primary school. You just have to be really careful all the time, and that. I feel sad about that, because I don't think people, you know, I am authentic, and people see what you see is what you get with me, and parents know that.
Yeah.
But I can't go out and get drunk in the local pub, you know,
Yeah.
because I can't do that, and so your life becomes quite closed down because of it. I mean, that's the personal side of it, and you know, that is impactful, and I don't think people necessarily think about that about you. You know, when I've been to dinner parties and then somebody's moaning about, you know, depending where we are, the local school, and they turn to me to ask about it, and I always say, well, in my village there's probably another dinner party going on and people are moaning about me. Oh, no. That's you're fair game. You're a public
Yeah.
figure, and
Yeah.
it is. I think in the early days that was tough. Now, again, broad shoulders. It doesn't really bother me so much, but it does. People only see a certain side to you, so that's quite tough. In terms of the everyday job, well, you know, the list is as long as your arm. There's always challenges. The way I look at things is that, you know, we take a very pragmatic view about it. If it's not statutory, we don't necessarily do it. You know, we will always look at stuff. You know, take each challenge and look at it and think about it for your school, and that makes it manageable, if that makes sense, rather than just getting weighed down by everything. You know, if I actually thought about everything I had to do, I'd probably go under. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm not a list maker, and I don't do that because I think I just dissolve. But
Georgina, please don't mention a list on any live stream or anything to do with anything, okay?
Yeah, sorry, Tom.
I'm joking.
Yeah.
You talk about it all the time you want. What do you think? I mean, we talked about the hardest part. When it comes to behaviour,
Yeah.
if you had to summarise your philosophy or your approach on behaviour, what would that be? How would you do that?
It's the mainstay, and it underpins everything. When I first arrived at this school 20 years ago, as a deputy head, I walked in and there were rules up everywhere. Lists of rules, 20.
Mentioning lists again, you just
Sorry,
can't help it, can
can't
you?
help it. Of like 20 close typed rules.
Yeah.
Including like in the children's loos, you know, don't loiter in the toilets, you know, this is in the 4-year-olders. Just awful. Lists of rules everywhere that nobody paid any attention to. The head at the time, you know, we made an impact on that. But when I first took over as headship, the thing that struck me about the only consistent thing about our approach to behaviour was the inconsistency.
Yeah.
So we had a younger guy working here then who took it on board to really look at behaviour management and really brought everybody together. It was about that conversation that we all had together about what was it we believed about behaviour, what did we want, and how did we want the children and the adults to be, you know, be towards each other. So we've got some golden rules. You know, there's a lot of stuff about golden rules and golden time, but we introduced golden rules and they're very simple, and we had golden time at the time. We've reviewed it since. We've still got the golden rules. Kids know and they understand those. A lot of it is about personal responsibility. So the way that we deal with behaviour is if a child is not behaving, you ask them which rule are they breaking rather than telling them. It puts it back in their court and then they say what they're doing. We don't do golden time anymore because it was just really difficult to make it work effectively.
Yeah.
And the kids who were not having golden time, it was like a naughty club.
Right.
And it was almost like a badge of honour, you know, that they were down with the naughty kids. Not that we use that word, but they did on a Friday with me, and it wasn't effective. So now actually it's just 5 minutes playtime they lose. And since that time, behaviour has improved even more. I mean, you've walked around the school today. You know,
I was impressed.
Kids are, you
honestly.
know, but all of that is underpinned by relationships. So actually, you know, we very rarely have to even use the golden rules now because it's all about relationships, knowing and understanding the children. And there are some kids who, you know, have, you know, their behaviour is more challenging, but there's often a reason for that, and it's unpicking that and working with them, and so that they become more responsible as they leave us. So it's paramount, because without good behaviour in place, you know, the learning is not going to happen, particularly for other children.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And how would you kind of calm an angry parent? Because I know this is something that a lot of leaders will have to encounter. It's certainly something that I've encountered. So how would you go about calming an angry parent?
Well, if they arrive at the door and they're already angry, the thing that I always think about is that for many parents, maybe the last time that they were in a head teacher's office might have been when they were in trouble themselves. You know, they've wound themselves up to come. They've already, you know, they might not have got the whole picture, they might not have got the whole story. They've wound themselves up. They're already coming in wound up. So the first thing that we do is we try to diffuse it as much as possible.
Yeah.
So invite people in, listen. I very rarely these days meet with somebody on my own. For all sorts of reasons, I've just learned over the years it's best to have somebody else here. Not because I'm trying to be bullying, with the weight of the school, but because it's really important that for personal safety of everybody that we've got somebody else there.
Yeah.
And also, to reflect on the conversation. But listening, a cup of tea. Sometimes we get things wrong, like I said, and I will always say that to a parent. Most of the time it is a case of listening, letting them get whatever it is off their chest.
Yeah.
And then sometimes not responding straight away, but saying, do you know what, leave that with me, because, that doesn't sound right. I absolutely understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I would feel angry as well, given that information, but,
Yeah.
but we need to find out what's happened. All the time, I did something really good, it was a course years ago, where if you're batting against somebody, you're just going to be like this.
Yeah.
Whereas actually you need to just go like that with them and then bring them round to your point of view. So again, the other thing is that if parents get really angry here, sometimes it is with justifiable reason, because actually that anger doesn't always come because I've got a relationship with them already. I'm on the gate every morning. I pass the time of day. I make sure I get to know parents. So if they've got angry, there probably is something behind it, and you do need to listen to that. At the same time, we've got stuff in place, and if they don't like it, parents will tell you here that when they come to look round, we are what we are. If they don't like it, don't come. We're not always going to change stuff just for you and just for your child. So we'll have those conversations as well. And most, we rarely have parents who very rarely have parents who leave.
Yeah.
But it is about listening, and sometimes it's about inviting them back in.
Yeah.
It's a difficult one though.
Yeah.
And particularly, you're talking about 13 years of experience I've got, of listening and working with parents and actually making them understand, what it is that we're about.
Yeah.
The other thing I say to them is that I don't sit in this office planning how I can upset your day.
Yeah.
If only it was that simple,
Yeah, absolutely.
So, if we've made a decision for some reason, it's been for a good reason, and I apologise if I haven't communicated it well enough.
Makes sense.
So,
Makes sense. And what about phones? I know this is a very big issue in education at the moment. It's the use of phones and that side of things. So what are your thoughts? Phones in class and phones in school in general?
Okay, so we're primary. Saying that, kids are having phones younger and younger. So we don't tend to use them in the classroom. Maybe that day will come because the technology is there, but it's not something we're considering at the moment. We do have kids who bring phones to school. I've just looked at that policy again, because it's not just phones, Tom. It's smartwatches. There's so many gadgets. You can't.
Yeah.
A phone is just a coverall, really. If they need it because they need it for the journey home, then we will just look after their phone. So they're not allowed to have it in school, mainly because if they're taking photos with them and then sharing that on the internet, we can't have that because not everyone's got permission.
Yeah.
So at the moment, that's how it is. But technology is changing all the time, and we need to be looking at that and thinking how we can best use it. What you can't do is wrap kids up in cotton wool, banning them from stuff. But that's continual conversations with parents that we're having.
Makes sense. And just moving on, I suppose that's part of the next question, really. But what's your vision for your school? What do you want it to look and feel like for a student who's coming into it?
God, you sound like an Ofsted inspector.
I doubt I'm going to be. We've probably got a comment here saying, that Tom sounds like an Ofsted inspector. No, I'm not, and probably never will be.
Does sound like an Ofsted inspector.
I don't sound like an Ofsted inspector. Come on. Yeah. What's the vision there? What do you want them to?
Okay, so our children are growing up in an ever-changing world. and one that we can't even begin to imagine what it's going to be like in 2 years' time, let alone 20 years' time. Just seen so much change. So really it's ensuring that they've got, and I don't want to get into a skills versus knowledge debate in this.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. But it is about having those traits, those skills, and that resilience, I suppose, that they can cope with life and change. But in a world where that is also changing outside, in terms of the environment. So you've seen the village. We drove into the village as I gave you a lift back from the station, and we are in the most beautiful setting. Our children are not our children, but children generally are more and more sedentary. So for us, it's about being outdoors, being active. You saw a lot of that today.
Yeah.
It's about looking at what we've got and making the best of it, and teaching children about that side of things. But always with this mind that they're going to need a basic set of skills that and they've got to have a good grounding in knowledge that they can apply that as they get older. I worry about that. We do worry about mental health and all that sort of thing. Again, it's all about relationships. Whether those relationships are between children, 4 and 4-year-old, or a 4 and a 40-year-old, or a 4 and a 100-year-old, doesn't make any difference. It's all about positive relationships and community. So the vision is, it is ever changing. It's always flexible.
Of course.
It's about that flexibility. Because our kids need that these days. We all do.
Of course.
Yeah.
And when you're hiring teachers, what are the kinds of things that you look for, and what's your perfect candidate for a teaching job? If you were to sum it up over the years, what would be the things? If you were to summarise it in a nugget.
Staff here are really passionate about what they do. I can't be doing with people who are moaning about staff, moaning about the profession, moaning about their job. We are privileged to work in our job. My husband's an accountant. He works in an office every day. I couldn't be doing that. I work in a situation, our staff work in a situation with young minds who just bring such joy. So I'm looking for people who get that, who want to build relationships, who are about community, who are givers and not just takers. Let's face it, a lot of teaching is so voluntary, we're dependent on goodwill. So there's that side of things as well. But working in a school that is also about giving, so that there's a really good sort of happy atmosphere here. When people start moaning about stuff, sometimes we do have a bit of a moan, but you have to look at yourself. They've got to be reflective. They've got to be reflective practitioners and want to do a good job. But at the same time, have a good life outside of school as well. So well-rounded. I don't want people who are only living and breathing teaching. They've got to be people outside as well, because that brings something to the mix too. Just nice people, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you, coming on to nice people, what are the things you like the most about Twitter for educators, and what do you hate the most about it? If you had to say one thing for each? Okay,
so I'm quite new on Twitter. Just over a year. I joined a few years before that because we had to join for something to do with the Olympics, I think. I never got it for years. Couldn't understand this thing called Twitter. What was it all about? I'd only just recently been on Facebook, so let alone Twitter. So the whole thing was just a mystery to me. But then decided that I ought to embrace it and just get out there and see what was going on and tweet the odd thing. The thing I love about it, over this sort of last year or so, is it's put me into touch with so many different people from around the country. We're very insular, in our schools or in our counties or in our clusters, whereas actually just getting a feel on Twitter for other people, what's going on, the blogs that are published, the articles that you're reading through it. It's been like the best CPD in many ways. I think it's been fantastic. The worst thing about it is it's so polarised, and it's good or bad, isn't it? It's traditional, progressive, it's knowledge or skills, it's, and those sort of things, I just scroll on by, to be honest with you. I don't tend to get embroiled in stuff. It's quite judgmental in many ways. But then it's the classic social media thing, isn't it? People are keyboard warriors, they can say what they like because they're not face to face with them. So I sort of get all of that, just don't, blocking and muting are my best friends in many ways. And that's what I'll use rather than engaging. I haven't got time, or I can't be bothered with it. And anyway, who am I? Because, people are not really interested. So but that's the worst side of things.
Yes.
There's so many, but there's more positives than there are negatives.
There's a lot more.
I'm trying to sell it to people here. But again, it's up to people whether they want to engage or not. Yeah.
For sure. So, talking about kind of being a leader, being a school leader, I'm just going to move that slightly so people can see it. There you go. Moving on to being a school leader, what does being visible mean to you? When people talk about, school leaders should be visible, what does that mean to you as a head teacher?
I'll tell you what it doesn't mean.
Yeah, go on.
It doesn't mean that I am out monitoring every breath that every member of staff is taking and being really heavy-handed. It shocks me what I hear about in some schools. So visibility here, first and foremost, when my son was going through school, if I asked him about the head teacher, if he wasn't able to answer, didn't know who the head was, or they never saw them, I'd feel really sad about that.
Yeah.
So there's one day which is all about the kids, and it's about being visible with the children and going out and just taking an interest in what they're doing and how they're doing it, and chatting to them on a personal level is really important to me. Standing on the gate in the mornings is the visibility, with the parents and with the community, and also inviting people in and so on. But with staff, visibility isn't about I'm not the threat. We've, for a long time now, we've had this thing in this school is that the teachers here are not doing things in order to make me happy. We're doing things because we've all agreed it, or we think it's right for the kids. So and there's got to be a layer of trust in there that that's what we're doing, that's what we've agreed. And so I don't have to go and check up on everybody and be breathing down their necks. So monitoring, it has changed over the years. We've gone through all sorts of things, but at the moment, monitoring here is about sitting down and having conversations with people, and that includes the kids. So a group of kids with the teacher, with the books. We talk about their learning. We talk about their work. What we can see the outcomes. So that's being visible as well. So I'm being visible in that way. So I'm being seen to, I suppose, lead in that respect. However, it's a dialogue, so it is about a dialogue. We don't have staff meetings every week in this school, so visibility is not about I'm going to lead a meeting every week at 3:30 on Tuesday, because that's not why am I doing that? So everything has got to be, if you're doing it to tick a box, if you're doing it because you want to be visible, that's not the right reason. I'm in and around school all the time. Either showing people around or because I'm just interested in what's going on. Yeah. I love being surprised. We went to classes today when people were just off going out, it was great. I love it. I'm not, I haven't memorised their timetables. We're very flexible here, but it is about trust. At the end of the day, if we're getting the results and the outcomes that we want and the kids are doing well, and, that's, I don't need to be breathing down people's back, necks in order to make that happen.
Yeah.
That's really, really important to me.
Perfect.
So it's about shared trust.
Perfect. Two tougher questions to finish. The first one is, how would you tackle bullying in the workplace? Because I know this is a big issue that I've written a lot about. I think there's a bit of a crisis really in this. I think there's a lot of stuff going on that's really not good in school. So how would you tackle bullying, and what would you say to kind of other school leaders who are part of a situation where they're seeing it happening? What are you going to do as a head teacher?
Okay. So I've worked, this is my 4th school, and I would say that in 2 of my previous schools I either witnessed bullying or I was bullied by staff members and senior leadership at that time. And having been through that and seen that happen at close quarters, seeing people being treated really badly, being treated badly myself, unforgivable, completely and utterly. Okay, someone's got a capability problem, that's a different thing, you deal with that, support and so on, how what your capability policy is, but you're going to be in there and supporting, and then maybe you have to make a decision that it's not the right career for that person or whatever. Bullying is completely different. When somebody is being undermined, when they're being made to feel like rubbish, often, my experience of it was often through weak leadership, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Leaders not knowing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then that came out in an aggressive way at staff who maybe challenged them or were questioning things. I'm touching wood at the moment, but I mean, hopefully, there hasn't been bullying in our workplace.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Rebel Education podcast and that interview with Georgina Young. You can follow the podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, and pretty much all other podcast providers. You can also tweet me at Rogers History on Twitter if you want to share any feedback on this podcast or any other podcast that you've listened to on the Rebel Education podcast. I will see you next Sunday. Cheers, everyone. Bye.